From the studios of AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota, this is The Gailey Show. I am your host, John Parker. Today, it's Thinking Clearly, Thinking Queerly, where we sit down with a guest for the episode to help us think more clearly on the major issues of the day facing the queer and allied community. After that, I'll continue my Queer and the Cosmos essay series. Today's guest is Ariel Gore. Ariel writes and makes books, zines, coloring books, and tarot cards. She is the founding editor and publisher of the Alternative Press award-winning magazines Hip Mama and the author of 13 lucky books of fiction and nonfiction. Her newest book, which came out March 11th, just last week, is Rehearsals for Dying, Digressions on Love and Cancer. Hi, Ariel. Welcome to The Gailey Show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. I'd like to start, if I may, by reading from your author's note, which is on the website from the publisher. And it says, "Dear reader, breast cancer is the most common type of cancer among adults in the world. Billions of dollars have been spent on so-called awareness campaigns over the past 40 years. So when my wife Dina was diagnosed, it surprised us that we knew almost nothing about what we could expect. We started what would become Rehearsals for Dying, Digressions on Love and Cancer as a place to gather real information and to create the space to ask all our unspeakable questions and talk about our unimaginable truths." Ariel, may we start there about the co-creation of the book?
Sure. My wife Dina was a pretty private person, but when we met and got together, I was already a memoirist. I was working on a memoir about my mom's cancer, and Dina became a character in that book, although she's only referred to as the chef. She was still a little, she was like, let's see if we don't put my name in, if the editor will catch that. So she's just the chef in this book called The End of Eve. But when she was diagnosed with breast cancer, and then we found out pretty quickly that it was metastatic breast cancer, which is considered universally terminal. It was like, I think she knew, Ariel's going to write about this, so she can write about it when I'm still alive, or she can write about it after I die. And I want her to write about it when I'm still alive, so I can have some more input. So I think she was excited to be a part of it instead of not be a part of it, but also it did become this space where we could have conversations that we maybe were too uncomfortable outside of the context of the book project. Like I would ask her questions about how she's feeling about her prognosis, about death, about her experiences, and she would be sort of reticent and be like, "Hey, but we have to put it in the book. So, this is for other people. This is a service to other people." And so it became a place where our relationship could kind of dig in a little deeper to what we were going through than felt comfortable in just casual conversation, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Share with us a little bit about Dina.
Well, she was a chef and a very almost like a stereotypical intense chef. She opened restaurants across the country, and but she was also really funny, and that sort of became maybe her main, or perhaps her only really reliable coping mechanism in going through all of this. She would, after these doctor's appointments where we would feel like we had no power, we were not seen, the news was maybe not good. We would go home and she'd start reenacting the medical appointments, until we had a really nice comedy routine. And so that also became sort of part of the book where, some of the encounters with medical people they're pretty funny, if I do so myself, but I didn't really write them entirely myself. When I've been going out and doing readings, her humor carries through.
Yes, it does. Very much so. In the author's note, you write that you hope us as readers will get some real awareness that isn't sponsored by the drug companies. And that got me thinking, as someone who has spent a long time in broadcasting, television, and radio, about how drug companies' information can be filtered through not just commercials and PSAs, but even marathons and nonprofits. Can you talk more about that awareness that you wanted to bring with this book?
Well, like you mentioned in the beginning, the billions of dollars have been spent on breast cancer awareness in my lifetime. And so, why didn't we know anything? And then when I started digging into that question, I discovered that almost everything I knew about breast cancer came from the Komen Foundation. And super controversial foundation that is politically conservative. And then digging more into like who are sponsoring Breast Cancer Awareness Month. It's drug companies and people want you to get mammograms, which, nothing specifically against mammograms, but it's a PR campaign. So that means you're not going to get the information that might be like, maybe a mammogram isn't going to work. Dina got mammograms every year. They never noticed that she had breast cancer. And so that's why she was metastatic on diagnosis, is that she got an ultrasound, and that's how they saw the breast cancer. So I think because mammograms have been so well marketed and some of these more common drugs have been so well marketed, I thought they worked really well. Or that a mammogram, which if a mammogram came out fine, if no one called you back, that means you don't have breast cancer. And so, certain mammograms certainly catch some breast cancers, but our information was based on somebody's PR campaign. And then, we go to these doctors, and where are they getting their information? They're going to conferences. Who's sponsoring the conferences? A certain drug company. So it's like, some of the information they're going to give you is going to be legit, but it's a PR source.
Yeah, I remember when I worked a number of years ago for an LGBTQ health equity organization, and when we would do conferences, our own, it was always this conversation in the, I was about to say control room or newsroom, not those, and just regular meetings about how do we, navigate sponsorships from drug companies who are pushing a particular product. Something I found very powerful was how you also included interviews. And towards the beginning of the book, there is a series of interviews that you have from folks talking about like self-examination of their breasts. Can you talk more about that?
Well, I thought it was so interesting, speaking of what I had learned about mammograms from the drug companies and people wanted to promote that procedure. I assumed that most breast cancers were found through mammogram, and that's not true. Most breast cancers are found by people noticing a change themselves, or, be it visual, or they did a self-exam. And then that played out in the people that I interviewed for the book, where, some people did discover they had breast cancer because of a mammogram, but the majority, maybe even the vast majority of people I interviewed noticed something themselves and then went and got that checked out. So that was really interesting. And for the interviews, like I really wanted to interview people at all stages of breast cancer. When Dina found out she had metastatic breast cancer, that put her in a category that the fundraisers don't like. It's, the Komen Foundation and other similar foundations that raise money for breast cancer kind of exclude you the minute it's metastatic. Now you're going to die. You're not going to be, a pink bow wearing survivor in their parades. And, Dina once got invited to a retreat for people with breast cancer. It was a week-long retreat. And then when the person discovered that she had metastatic breast cancer, they're like, can you just come on Thursday night? So it's like they don't want you to talk to the other people because they don't want, it's a downer, right? I have a terminal diagnosis. So I thought, come on, the people with earlier stages of breast cancer are very aware that it could metastasize if they sort of, go into remission or, have good luck with their treatment. It could come back at a later date. They've I would be surprised if, they haven't done their own research, even if the foundation is trying to protect them from these things. So aren't we all in this together? Don't people who have breast cancer and their caregivers and their loved ones have more in common than we have not in common, just because some people are going to die.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so, it's part of American cultures like that too, right?
Oh, yes.
Nobody wants to talk about death. As soon as you're like, I'm going to die, it's like, get out of here.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, in my family, when they would suddenly reveal that, a brother of my grandmother had Alzheimer's, and I was like, oh, that's good to know. Like, we should get to you folks get checked for that. And they looked at me like, why would you say that? Now you've doomed us all to get it. And I'm like, no, that's not how this is supposed to work.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's it, that people think of it as sort of a curse. Like if you mention death, then you will die. Well, unfortunately, like you will die no matter what, no matter if we say it or not. And for me, I like to kind of rehearse things beforehand in my mind's eye. I like to understand what is going on. I think that with Dina's breast cancer diagnosis in the beginning, when we found out that it was metastatic, both of us understood that that meant that she would most likely die of breast cancer in, 5 years or less. But then, and you think of kind of the stages of grief as going from denial to acceptance, right? But instead, we both started at this kind of acceptance and understanding point. And then as Dina got more and more into the medical world and breast cancer support group world, she started going more and more into denial, really, so that even when she's just a few days from death, she really thought we were still going to turn it around. And that may be
can we pick that up after a quick break? We have included a link in today's show notes and on our website to buy your own copy of Rehearsals for Dying, Digressions on Love and Cancer. More with Ariel Gore when we come back after this break. Welcome back to the Gaily Show. I'm your host, John Parker. It is 21 minutes past the hour. It is Thursday, which is our time of the week for Thinking Clearly, Thinking Queerly. My guest is Ariel Gore. She teaches writing online at Ariel Gore's School for Wayward Writers at the Literary Kitchen. Her anthology, Portland Queer, Tales of the Rose City, won the Lambda Literary Award for Best LGBT Anthology. We're talking about her new book, Rehearsals for Dying, Digressions on Love and Cancer, which just came out last week on March 11th. Ariel, you were talking about before the break how you and Dina felt you were in this acceptance stage of the grieving process, but then as you both were going through the conferences and the treatments and everything that comes with that, felt like you were moving back into the denial stage. Can you share more about that?
Well, I felt like Dina was. I was sort of holding this thing where I understood she was going to die the whole time, but then it was like you do start to wonder, like, am I thinking negatively? Does negative thinking cause cancer? And so I was trying to hold the realism also for our son, who I didn't want him to have set up for an even greater disappointment, thinking that these treatments were going to work in terms of extending her life by that much. It's possible that they extended her life by maybe a year or so total. So it's not nothing. It's not necessarily something you wouldn't want to do, but that's not how the medical teams would present the options to Dina. They would present them for, as if, she's just buying a little bit more time until they find a cure, or, they really just fed into this hope narrative. That was, it was pretty hard on me. It was pretty hard on our son to, as Dina got closer and closer to the end of her life, the topic of death got more and more taboo. And, I don't know. I don't have a terminal diagnosis, so I may respond in exactly the same manner, regardless of whether or not doctors pressure me to do so. But it was hard to watch the oncology community really feed into this kind of false hope.
Mm-hmm. There is talking about American cultural value. I think that is an absolute. There's this. You think like, yes, you need to have hope, but at the same time, it can become very, very counterproductive. And I just appreciated how you were unpacking that for us throughout your book. I read an interview that you gave with the Santa Fe Reporter, and you said that you think about writing as something where the goal is to put you in touch with the universal spirit and break that barrier between like the you and I, and that grief is the thing that puts you in touch with the universal spirit because everybody knows about it. Can you share more about that? Because that really struck me when I read that.
Sure. One interesting thing, like when Dina was diagnosed, so when people often said to her and to me, I can't imagine what you're going through. And then after she died, they often said to me, I can't imagine what you're going through. Well, that's not true, is it? Everyone knows about death. Everyone knows about grief. Maybe your partner hasn't had cancer. Maybe your partner hasn't died, but you actually can imagine, I would argue. And you don't, I think people started saying that because people didn't like it when they said, oh, I know what you're going through, or I know how you're feeling. But my question is like, why not? Let's leave what you know out of it. Like, that's not the topic. But yeah, this idea that people don't know about grief is such a lie. And I think it's got to be back to that thing where we feel like if we were to acknowledge how much grief we've gone through, if we were to acknowledge how much we know about death, then we would have to also admit that it's possible that we might die someday. And that might, or the people that we love are going to die. And so it sort of invokes this idea of something that we don't want to deal with. But yeah, I find that people who are willing to talk about it, other widows, people are just kind of push past that death anxiety and want to talk about it. It very much puts you in touch with the universal spirit faster and kind of better than art can, which is amazing because I think art is like the greatest thing. And maybe art's more fun, but it's really grief that puts us in touch with each other and allows us to know what each other is going through. We can imagine it. And I would argue that a lot of us do imagine it and just don't talk about it.
Yes.
It's more like I don't want to imagine it.
Yeah. Treating it like an intrusive thought as opposed to
exactly
from a good mental health perspective. Speaking of saying things, Dina throughout the book says a lot. Thank you for saying that. Was that something that Dina said prior to the diagnosis, or was it something that she wanted to affirm that she was hearing what she needed to hear from you?
Well, that's one of those funny phrases where I never knew quite what it meant, because when I said I did not want her to get a new dog when she was most likely dying within a year, she said, thank you for saying that, and then turned around and got a dog. So what does it mean? I think she probably said it beforehand too. She also used to say this thing for the longest time when we were together, where she would, at the end of something, she would say, good talk. And I didn't know for the longest time that it meant that she just felt like I wasn't listening, or that, the talk has gone nowhere. I thought she really meant we had a good talk. I was like, oh, good. Like I did good. But then I realized later, and so we dedicated this bench to her on the Santa Fe River Trail. And so it just says Dina Chaffetz and her dates, and it just says good talk. That's the good talk bench. That was my son's idea, actually. I wanted to put something a little more poetic, and I was like, what does that mean to you, that phrase good talk? And he's like, well, I just think of it, her saying that as like, come in here by the shower and see that you let all this water out on the floor. Next time you do that, think about the fact that I'm disabled and I'm going to slip on that and I'm going to break all my bones. Good talk. And you'd be like, what? So it was just getting at her sort of bossy self. But yeah, thank you for saying that. As an interesting one too, where it's like this ambivalent thing. It might not mean quite what you hope it would mean.
Right. Okay, I see that. We're laughing here, and that brings up a review that Tignataro gave for the book, which is "Breast cancer is no joke, but sometimes finding the humor shifts the story into something you can tell, and rehearsals for dying will help many." I've got to fit in another break here, but I'd love to talk about more about the strategic use of humor that you use there, particularly with the Puppies and Mustangs Forever piece, because that, I think, weirdly was my favorite. I don't know if that's weirdly or not, but that was one of my within the book. But we're going to take a short break. We've included, again, a link in today's show notes and on our website for you to buy your own copy of Rehearsals for Dying, Digressions on Love and Cancer. More with Ariel Gore when we come back. Broadcasting from the studios of AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota. This is The Gailey Show. I'm your host, John Parker. It is 33 minutes past the hour. Today is our weekly episode of Thinking Clearly, Thinking Queerly, where we sit down with a guest for the episode to help us think more clearly on the major issues of the day facing the queer and allied community. Today's guest is Ariel Gore. Ariel writes and makes books, zines, coloring books, and tarot cards. She is the founding editor and publisher of the Alternative Press award-winning magazine, Hip Mama, and the author of 13 books of fiction and nonfiction. Her newest book, which came out March 11th, just last week, is Rehearsals for Dying, Digressions on Love and Cancer. Ariel, what we were starting with just before the break is the strategic use of humor in this book, and several reviewers of it picked up on it. It definitely came through for me when I was reading it. And the piece, the most so, was Puppies and Mustangs Forever. So talk to me more about setting we were talking in the break too, about setting the tone for the book and what you were hoping to accomplish through that use of humor.
Well, throughout the whole book, I'm trying to sort of lay out, like, how did we deal with this? How did we deal with this emotionally? And the answer most days was that we laughed really hard at just doctors' ridiculous things. I mean, the first surgeon that we went to go see said, "I can give you the breasts of a 30-year-old." Like that, like, some people think of this diagnosis as a blessing, and we just never stop laughing about that. I mean, it's so horrendous, an insane thing to say to someone. But we just really, and so then, Dina would, over the months get better and better at her impersonation of this doctor saying that. And, it's the only way that we got through things. And I think it's really like the evolutionary role of laughter is to kind of let out tension. It's sort of like why we think things are funny that really approach something that would hurt you, but stop short of something that would hurt you. So it was a way to kind of take our power back and from these situations, and a way to probably, served getting her health back on certain days when she was really run down by treatments. It was certainly a way that we dealt with it around the dinner table with my son. Like, some treatment wouldn't work and he would just look stricken and not know what to say. And then, Dina would say, "Oh, I'm thinking about donating my body to UNM Medical School, but the only pick up between, 60 miles away, and we're 65 miles away. Can you drop me off at the mall after I die? And he would just, you can't help, he wouldn't be able to help but laugh. And so that would shift the mood into something that we could deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And, I feel like dark humor in particular, there's a long history of that being a way to deal with hard things, whether it's, an authoritarian government or cancer or, your homophobic uncle. You can't always make him unhomophobic, but you can certainly mock him, and that helps a lot.
I love that you brought the taking back the power, because it felt sometimes counterintuitive, where I'm like laughing and I'm like, should I be laughing right now? But as I'm going along, I'm like, but this feels like both of you are reclaiming agency and control over the situation through that, the making fun of, in particular, Dr. Vogue in the book. And I just, the puppies and Mustangs piece, where you're both realizing, you and your son, throughout the piece, that, oh, Dina is actually going to go and buy a dog, and then you sort of watch it unfold of suddenly now you're getting text messages of different puppies, and then the next thing, and then share with us the book that was, or the dog that was eventually selected, and why Dina got that particular dog.
Well, she got a 13-year-old diabetic Yorkie because she thought that was one dog she would outlive. I don't remember what's in the chapter, but that's what's coming to mind now. I mean, spoiler, that dog outlived her. But yeah, well, I don't know what part you were thinking of, but that whole scene was, she was funny, and that was a way for her to take back her power too, even, from us, like, well, you guys can do anything you want, you don't think you're gonna die, I want a puppy. Good luck dealing with it later, but it was a way that she really could just be like, you know what, I get to make irrational decisions just like everyone else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The structure of the book reminded me a little bit of Carmen Marie Machado's In the Dream House, and that each piece or chapter is 1 to 4 pages long, and some are narrative of a particular memory, some are interviews, some are poetry. And I remember I was very lucky and got to interview Carmen about it, and she even said that there were certain things that she just did, and she didn't even realize she was making like writerly choices about it. But as you were now then thinking about, okay, I have this manuscript going, Dina, it's in a shared folder, Dina's being able to see this, we're co-creating it. As you got to the part of like, okay, we're gonna make this a manuscript, like, how did that structure, like, did you think about making it into a more traditional, quote unquote, like narrative, or how you created the pieces? Like, I'm just from a craft perspective interested in the process that you went through of creating and arranging the pieces.
Sure. I mean, the structure is really similar to another book I did with the feminist press called We Were Witches, which is about being a queer teen mom. Excuse me. There's that. So I like that kind of changing rhythm and having it be this pastiche structure, because that's also just how I experience life. It's not really a through line narrative. It's like a grocery list and a partial narrative and a journal entry. And then, we stuck in these little snippets from, Dina was writing a musical called Cancer, the musical. And so we used snippets from that. And then also her social media updates was a way for me to put her voice in the book more directly. Mm-hmm. And so I found that really kind of mirrored my experience more than doing a straight narrative. And also I just felt like for having those really short chapters is probably helpful to a reader who this is kind of a heavy topic. I'm very happy that readers are saying it's not triggery, but you do want those breaks, I think. And so I like the short chapters for that, and also to weave in the other voices with other people who are dealing with breast cancer, and also to weave in the journalistic information. I think in the beginning of the book, there's more journalism and more research. So then I started thinking of the book as this kind of like river structure where we had like this meandering pace in the beginning. And then as Adina's death became a more imminent, kind of speeding up the pace and, pushing journalism aside and really focusing on what was going on experientially and emotionally for both of us as that became more and more inevitable and seemed like it was going to happen soon. I mean, cancer is so interesting in this case anyway, and I think a lot of people have this experience with cancer, is that you do have a few years, so you know that you are going to die probably younger than you had originally expected in life. But a few years, I mean, that's enough time to go through every emotion you've ever heard of. It's enough time that, your marriage could fall apart. Anything could happen. When Dean was first diagnosed, our son was 12. He was 16 when she died. And so, he had to, turn from a little guy into this guy who looks like a man over that same period of time. So anyway, yeah.
It's so interesting that you said that you were treating it like a river, because about a quarter of the way in, I'm like, I gotta just ease into it. And I'm like, this feels like, you've created this amazing, I can just kind of float along on this raft, boat, canoe, whatever. And just, you had managed the emotions of it so well that it just kind of felt like, okay, I can just go with it and the flow of it. And that was literally the image that I had.
Oh, good.
So it's the way that it's written. It does have that sense of, okay, you can, the way that you take us as a reader and managing like the emotions and just the way that you weave things in and out. And like when you brought in the voices, I'm like, this is so perfect. You brought them in like exactly like emotionally when, I would want to hear from them. And so it's just, I'm gushing now, obviously. But
good. It was gush away.
it was I don't know how to say, like, I love the book given like the topic of it and the weight of it, but it was
you can love it.
good because I did. I did want to ask you about, so Dina made a zine during her treatment called Kittens, Blunts, and Metastatic Breast Cancer. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yes, she started doing more social media posts about her experience, and then we decided to sort of collect those into a zine, and a lot of those are in the book, but we were able to put the zine out when she was still alive, and I illustrated it, and it was a way to get her personality out there, but also a lot of information about breast cancer, and people with metastatic breast cancer in particular have responded so well to that zine, because it's like, finally, this is something real, and it's just this teeny tiny zine, but it's so rare to get something from the real and lived experience, not to mention the queer experience in the cancer world, that people were just so happy. It's like, this is not sponsored by a drug company.
Right.
But then, also getting all that both information, that things that she found out about these various drugs, things that she found out about mammograms, but also just her personality, which is just like, again, mocking people who did us wrong.
Well, Ariel, thank you so much for joining us here on the show today. How can folks connect with you?
Well, they can find my classes at literaryKitchen.org. that's the main place. I'm also have my own website at arielgore.com.
And what kind of classes do you teach at Literary Kitchen?
I teach experimental memoir, surprise, and manuscript workshops. I have a experimental memoir class coming up in April. And then other people also teach at my school for wayward writers. So we have a graphic medicine class coming up this summer where Maureen Burdock will be teaching about turning your medical experiences into graphic memoirs or comic books.
Oh, wow. Oh, that must be very interesting.
Right.
The union of the graph. Oh, wow.
So graphic medicine.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Ariel, I have so enjoyed this time. Brief as it turns out, we raced right by. But friend of the show. So when you've got new works coming out, particularly, I wanted to talk about tarot. We didn't get a chance to yet. If you've got a tarot deck coming out anytime soon, I'm a student and would love to learn more about it and the work that you're doing.
Oh,
but
cool. Let's talk again.
Anytime you've got something coming out, please let us know. We'll gladly have you back on to talk about it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We have got a link in the show notes today and on our website to buy your own copy of Rehearsals for Dying, Digressions on Love and Cancer. Coming up next, I will continue my Queer and the Cosmos essay series. One last break, but lots to get to still here on The Gaily Show. Welcome back to The Gaily Show. I'm your host, John Parker. Every week, I close out our Thinking Clearly episodes with a new essay in my Queer and the Cosmos series, which is written just for the show and only available here. It is a series exploring queer life through the cosmos. Lightyear 7. I just got back from Sagittarius A star last week, and that black hole, our Milky Way's black hole, is profound to consider, but it was emotionally intense. And an emotional break is in order, I think, for this week. As I flew back into our solar system, yes, imaginatively speaking, I had a really dumb thought. But it wasn't dumb because I'm dumb. Let's not go down that path again. It was dumb because of the phenomenon of an everyday object becoming so familiar to us, we call it an everyday object. It's just there. We stop seeing it. For example, I don't think about my cabinets. They're just there. I need them. They serve a very useful purpose in my life. But my cabinets are invisible in the sense that I don't think about them. I don't consider how I interact with them because it's so repetitive. I don't think about which arm to raise to reach them or which fingers to use to grab the edges of the doors because the doors don't have handles. I don't even think about needing to buy handles. I don't think about checking the hinges or the size of them or how many shelves are in them. My cabinets are just there. They're always there. And at this point, the thought or description of them is just banal. So I was flying back into our solar system again, yes, imaginatively speaking. And I had a dumb thought because of this phenomenon. I reflected on how unfair it is that I passed billions of stars traveling to and from the center of the Milky Way, and how I, and by extension, we, will never get to be up close to a star. All the stars are X number of light years away, and they'll forever be glittering points of light to us. We'll never get to be up and close and personal to a star. You've probably already realized why that thought was dumb. The sun. The sun is a star. Yes, duh, obviously. We are up close and personal to a star. It only takes 8 minutes for sunlight to travel through space to us. But the sun is so boring. A star is a star, magical and possibly far away, equally dazzling and bright as it is dull and faint, but always, always mysterious. The sun is the sun. We wake up and it's there. We drive home and we spin away from it day after day after day. Some of us never see it because of incessant gray clouds hiding it. Some of us never stop seeing it except at nighttime. For some of us, it's boiling and oppressive, and for others of us, it's purely decorative. The sun doesn't give doesn't serve starlight, it just gives the same sunlight as it ever does. To be fair, humanity didn't even consider the sun to be a star until the 1600s, when scientists took the idea seriously but couldn't prove it. Thanks to the Catholic Church arresting, torturing, and killing scientists, it was hard enough time proving the sun was at the center of the solar system, let alone a star. But it wasn't until the 1800s when an Italian Jesuit priest and astronomer, Angelo Secchi, proved the sun was a star. He pioneered stellar spectroscopy. He analyzed 4,000 stellar spectrograms and created the very first classification systems for stars. Through his work, he definitively concluded that the sun was a star. So maybe it's not my fault per se. We being humans, have been around for a few 100,000 years, but have only definitively known the sun was a star for less than 200. Maybe we should rename the sun. I mean that only half jokingly. As I write this, looking out my window, I feel a different sensation in my body when I say, that light I'm seeing is sunlight, versus that light I'm seeing is starlight. Half the calcium in the universe was created in stars. And sunlight, no, starlight, gives us vitamin D, which helps us to promote calcium growth in our bodies. Our teeth started out in a star that blew up somewhere in the universe, and now a star helps keep them healthy. Take it a step further. I am jealous of plants. They create a physical substance out of air and sunlight. Hold out your hand into the sun, palm facing up. Can you take what's there in the palm of your hand and make sugar? A plant can. And like the worst students in high school, we let plants do all the homework, and then we swoop in and take the grade, eating the plants for the sugar. Thanks, guys. And oh, by the way, totally taking for granted that you just took air and starlight and made it into a life-saving substance, life-sustaining substance. Humans couldn't have photosynthesis, apparently, because we use and need too much energy, which is a shame. I mean, imagine the revolution we could throw if we had human photosynthesis. Or actually, we wouldn't need to have a revolution, because we never would have created exploitative capitalist nation states that police and regulate queer bodies if we could create food out of sunlight shining on our skin and in breathing oxygen. But even if our skin was all green and we had the mechanisms for photosynthesis, we're not big enough, physically speaking, to have enough available skin to create the food and thus energy needed to live off of the sun and air. But we didn't know the sun was a star until a few 170 years ago or so. So maybe out there are queer humanoids we will never meet, walking and running across their planet, never having to take the time to grow, hunt, farm, and manufacture their food into plastic containers that will cause them to ingest tiny particles of plastic along with that food that will end up lodged in their brains. Lucky them. Can you imagine, though, having such an intimate relationship with a star? Maybe ours isn't as intense or special, but it is there. And not with the sun, per se. We have this special relationship with one of those billions of stars shining in an infinite cosmos. Thanks, everyone, for listening today. The Matt McNeil Show is coming up next. Stay tuned after that for Native Roots Radio. And until tomorrow at 2 p.m., keep it queer, America.